President Trump has defeated the Democrats, the mullahs, and even the markets. Will a confrontation with Vladimir Putin be his biggest challenge yet? I'm Elizabeth Vargas, and America's News starts right now.
Tonight.
We get off the phone. Oh, that was a very nice conversation. And then he sends missiles into buildings someplace.
Enough talk. President Trump says he's done playing games with Russia's Vladimir Putin as he announces his plan to send billions of dollars of weapons to Ukraine and puts Putin on a deadline. Is it enough to stop the bombing? Then, you heard it here first, Andrew Cuomo was back in the New York City mayoral race, this time as an independent. He says he can still win, despite Zoran Mamdani's incredibly popular pie-in-the-sky promises. And later, a group of scientists studying UFOs caught a bunch of them on camera, and one of them still cannot be explained. So what was it? I'll ask one of the physicists leading the research.
Happy Monday, everyone. Great to start the week with you. We begin tonight with a question. Trade wars often start shooting wars, but can they also end them? President Trump thinks so, and he's prepared to use his favorite weapon. That would be tariffs, not bunker busters, to produce a ceasefire in Ukraine. The plan is to step up pressure on Russia, in no small part because nothing else seems to be working. Sure, there's plenty of talk, but very little sign that Putin has much interest in peace. In fact, any lip service paid by the Russian president to the peace process in recent months has been followed up almost immediately by still more brutal missile and drone attacks, often targeting Ukrainian civilians. President Trump is clearly frustrated and today announced a two-step approach, pledging to send more weapons to Ukraine and threatening very severe tariffs against Russia. The announcement marks a big change from Trump, who once called Putin a genius and who had said he could end the war in 24 hours.
I would like to see it end. It wasn't my war, it was Biden's war. It's not my war. I'm trying to get you out of it. And we want to see it end. And I'm disappointed in President Putin because I thought we would have had a deal 2 months ago, but it doesn't seem to get there. So based on that, we're going to be doing secondary tariffs if we don't have a deal in 50 days. It's very simple.
All right, Trump announced the weapons deal after an Oval Office meeting with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte today. Under the agreement, billions of dollars in U.S. weapons will be sent to Ukraine, and our NATO allies will foot the bill. The weapons would include Patriot air defense missiles, which Ukraine has urgently requested. They help defend Ukraine against Russian strikes, which have increased tenfold since last year. Trump said some of the weapons could arrive within days. And then Trump threatened those tariffs if there is no peace deal in 50 days. He said secondary tariffs of 100% would be imposed on third countries that buy Russian exports. For more on all this, let's go to Kelly Meyer, NewsNation's White House correspondent. Kelly, big announcements today. The question is, will they work?
Yeah, exactly, Elizabeth. Two big announcements there with NATO and shipping the weapons to Ukraine, and then with the threat of sanctions on Russia, but giving them the 50-day window. We're also hearing that First Lady Melania Trump has also been adding in her 2 cents into the mix. We know that President Trump revealed today some of the private conversations they've been having around his phone calls with Russian President Vladimir Putin. Melania, she is originally from Yugoslavia, now Slovenia in Central Europe, and she has been more compassionate and empathetic towards the situation and what's been happening in Ukraine over the last few years, really, and expressing that to President Trump. Take a listen to this.
I'd get home, I'd say, First Lady, I had the most wonderful talk with Vladimir. I think we're finished. And then I'll turn on the television, or she'll say to me one time, wow, that's strange because they just bombed a nursing home.
So this raised the question today, Elizabeth, if Melania may be behind some of the shift that we're seeing in President Trump's tone on Putin. A White House official tells me that, not to read into it too much, that President Trump feels as though recently Putin is more all talk. But it is a shift from what President Trump told me just 2 months ago in the Oval Office. Take a listen to this.
You mentioned that you believe Putin wants peace, but he just attacked Ukraine yesterday. So what makes you think that he wants peace?
Well, he's in a war, you know. I mean, No, nobody said don't. They're fighting. They're attacking each other. And people are dying all the time. He's in a war. He's fighting a war. Nobody said he was going to stop. I think, is it terrible? Yeah, it's terrible. I think it's terrible.
It's also interesting to see, Elizabeth, the warming relationship between Trump and Ukrainian President Zelensky. Zelensky posted on X today that the two spoke today. They had a good conversation, and they agreed to keep in touch in the future. He also said that it was a very good conversation, and he appreciates and is grateful for the willingness to bring this war to an end. A Ukrainian official I spoke to today, though, Elizabeth, says those drone strikes from Russia continue, and he is concerned about that 50-day window that Putin may take advantage of it and just continue those attacks within that window. Elizabeth?
Yeah, when you're fighting for your life, 50 days is a long time. Kelly Meyer reporting live from the White House. Thank you. For more now, we're joined by Kurt Volker, former U.S. ambassador to NATO. Ambassador, great to have you here. Let's start with these weapons that President Trump approved to send to Ukraine. Ukraine urgently needs these Patriot missile defense systems, and only the U.S. has them. Axios reports the U.S. will send $10 billion worth of weapons to NATO, which will give them to Ukraine. Is that enough for the Ukrainians?
Well, it's a great step. It's a great start. It's essential that we eliminate the uncertainty about the availability of American weapons and ammunition for Ukraine. For the last 5 months, it's been very unclear, would we approve these kinds of sales to Ukraine or not? Now it's clear we're willing to do it. They're going to move. This is very significant. It's a signal to Putin that we have the ability and the will to do this, which means that his military effort is ultimately not going to succeed.
Well, Putin thinks he has the momentum right now in this fight.
I don't know about that. I think he's trying to grab what he can while he still can. He knows that his finances are under stress. He's having trouble recruiting the new people into the military that he wants to recruit, given the level of casualties that they have had. The economy is in bad shape, and people in Russia are impatient with that. So I think he's actually escalating in order to create an appearance of strength and to grab what he can. But I think he also knows he's going to have to settle for a ceasefire at some point.
Trump also announced these sanctions, 100% sanctions on Russia in 50 days if Russia doesn't agree to a ceasefire. And most notably here, the secondary sanctions on countries like India and China, because we don't really trade with Russia. That's what's going to hit them hard. These 100% sanctions are much less than the bill in the Senate, which has widespread support, which calls for 500% sanctions. What do you make of the decision by President Trump to impose just 100% sanctions and to wait 50 days to do it?
Well, I think, first off, on the 50-day warning, I think he wants a deal. He wants Putin to stop the war. So he's actually trying to create the leverage and create the opportunity for Putin to actually stop it. He's also trying to tell countries like China and India, you have 50 days to figure this out. You go tell Putin to stop the war, because if he doesn't, you're going to pay 100% tariffs on the goods that you're shipping to the United States, and you don't want to do that. So go tell Putin to stop the war. And if they can't convince Putin, then they need to make alternative arrangements for energy supplies. So it puts a little bit of pressure on everybody, and I think that's the intent that Trump has in this, is not necessarily to follow through, but rather to create the incentives for everybody to solve this.
But will it? Because we've seen President Trump threaten big tariffs on practically the entire world and then back down from his own threats and his own deadlines.
Well, that's the key question. And in the case of Iran, on day 61, Israel launched massive attacks on Iran. The U.S. followed through, and now we have a peace deal between Israel and Iran. In the case of Putin, Trump put out 2-week deadlines in the past, only to renew them with another 2 weeks and another 2 weeks. So we have to see if this 50-day deadline really sticks. But I think this combination of things, steady supply of arms for Ukraine, secondary sanctions that can dry up the funds going to the Kremlin's war budget, possibly lend-lease for Ukraine if the Congress were to approve that, where we lend money to Ukraine, they buy American weapons, they pay us back later, and then possibly seizing the frozen Russian assets from the central bank that are in both the U.S. and Europe. In the U.S., it's only $8 billion, but in Europe, it's 260 plus.
It's a lot of money.
If we would do that, that's a lot of money, and it could pay for a lot of financial support and a lot of weapons for Ukraine that Russia would end up paying for. So these are things to put on the table to really get Vladimir Putin thinking about, does he really want to continue the war?
The reaction from Russia so far seems to be a collective shrug. One Russian lawmaker said, quote, if this is all Trump has to say about Ukraine, then for now it's all just hot air.
Yeah. Never listen to what the Russians say. Ask yourself, why are they saying it? In this case, Trump has done something really significant here. And so they are saying something to try to make it seem insignificant. But the reality is they know that this is a shift, both in tone and in policy from Trump. And they know that more things are coming if they don't change what they're doing. And they just are watching Vladimir Putin now to figure out, okay, is Putin going to fight back or is Putin going to shift? But they are saying this because it's significant, and that's why they want to downplay it.
Yeah, it is a very dramatic shift in both tone and now, as of today, policy on behalf of President Trump and this administration. We'll see if the pressure does anything. I don't know, Ambassador. You know Vladimir Putin well. Do you think he's going to agree to a peace deal in 50 days?
I don't think Putin will ever agree to a peace deal. I think that he is driven by visions of empire, of genocide, legacy, being one of the great Russian leaders in a pantheon next to Catherine the Great and Peter the Great. That's what motivates Vladimir Putin. So he's not going to be giving up. And that's why it's very important that we put in place these very tough measures, because he's not going to create a ceasefire willingly.
Right.
He's going to have to be forced into it.
All right. Ambassador Kurt Volker, great to have you here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, coming up next. First, they were sitting on Pam Bondi's desk. Now they're nowhere to be seen. Yet we're talking about the Epstein files, including the infamous client list, which has apparently vanished without a trace. But did it ever exist to begin with? It's a question that threatens to split the MAGAverse in two. And later, he may have lost the battle, but Andrew Cuomo thinks he can still win the war. The former governor is running for mayor of New York City as an independent, he announced today. But how will he compete with rent freezes, free childcare, and a $30 minimum wage? That's straight ahead.
NewsNation Wednesday, the Hill Nation Summit, a first-of-its-kind bipartisan event, bringing those in the know and those in power together, with all-day special coverage starting at 6 a.m. Eastern, interviews with Speaker Mike Johnson and DHS Secretary Kristi Noem, and more. Plus special guests. Join Chris Cuomo live at 8 p.m. Wednesday, only on NewsNation.
The White House would love it if the Jeffrey Epstein case just went away. But like a rude house guest, it's not leaving. On the contrary, it could possibly lead to the first departure from the president's cabinet if some of Trump's own supporters have their way. Attorney General Pam Bondi is taking the brunt of the blame for appearing to backtrack on the Trump administration's promise to release secret files on Jeffrey Epstein. In February, Bondi invited dozens of right-wing social media influencers to the White House for a big unveiling of new information on Epstein. But after the influencers went home and read through all those big white binders, it turned out there wasn't anything new in them. Then last week, surprise, the Justice Department released a memo stating there is in fact no client list and no murder plot after all. The administration is accustomed to its decisions giving Democrats the vapors, but in this case, the howling is coming from the right, which has long believed that the Epstein case has been the story of a deep state cover-up. According to our partners at The Hill, FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, a longtime Epstein conspiracy theorist himself, is thinking of quitting the Trump administration over this. And the furious backlash to the DOJ was front and center at this weekend's Conference of Young Conservatives in Florida.
How many of you are satisfied? You can clap. Satisfied with the results of the Epstein investigation? Clap.
It's on her desk. It's coming tomorrow. You're going to see something on Epstein. And it was a tease. So you either believe that Pam Bondi was telling the truth then or that she's telling the truth now. But both cannot be true.
But the fact that the U.S. government, the one that I voted for, refused to take my question seriously and instead said, case closed, shut up, conspiracy theorist, was too much for me. And I don't think the rest of us should be satisfied with that.
NewsNation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil joins me with more. Joe, Dan Bongino didn't go to work on Friday. He was back at the office today, but is he backing off his threat to quit?
Well, look, the White House would like you to believe everybody is back on the same page, whether it's Bongino and Attorney General Pam Bondi and FBI Director Kash Patel. The White House gave us a statement today saying that essentially we're all on one team and everything is great. It's clearly a much more complicated situation than that. We have confirmed that Dan Bongino did, in fact, show up for work today at the FBI. We know last week he was not there at all, and that was in protest of the way that the other people on that page, particularly Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, has handled the Epstein files. In part, that was his big grievance last week. He's obviously still upset about it. So look, as much as the White House wants to turn the page on this, you've heard from the MAGA base. You just played several of those clips. The influencers there, they are not letting this go. They are pretty upset about what they see now as a lack of transparency. And interestingly, Elizabeth, that has also carried over to Capitol Hill. As I was there today, you've got two Democrats now introducing separate measures that would demand and that would mandate that Attorney General Bondi release all of the files relating to Jeffrey Epstein within 30 days. Whether those pass, we don't know, but there was another measure in the Senate that did get bipartisan unanimous support, essentially keeping the Epstein files and not destroying any of them. So there's interest here on both sides. Why don't you take a listen to Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. He was asked whether he's got faith in Pam Bondi and whether he would support pushing for the release of the files. Speaker Johnson here.
The White House has a lot more information about that than I'm privy to, so I have to trust that they'll make the right decision, but I think they will. So we'll see.
Do you have faith in Bondi? Do you have faith in Bondi?
I do.
And a much different take from the Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, who says he's for releasing all of these files now. Not exactly sure what legislation that looks like, but then he elaborated this way.
Option one, Donald Trump, Pam Bondi, and the MAGA extremists intentionally lied to the American people for years about the Jeffrey Epstein situation. That's option one. Option two is that, in fact, there's reason for the American people to be concerned as it relates to what information has not been released.
So, Elizabeth, it's really interesting. You do not often hear leader Hakeem Jeffries and people like Megyn Kelly framing a situation in the exact same way. But they sound awfully similar in the sound bites that we just heard. I think that's just an indication that this is not going away.
My head is spinning because we're hearing elected Democrats allied with some of the MAGA sphere in saying, show us the files. Unbelievable. Joe Khalil, thanks so much. Joining me now is National Review editor Rich Lowry and NewsNation media contributor Colby Hull. Great to have both of you guys with me. Colby, Trump is begging his supporters to, quote, stop wasting time talking about Epstein, but you write today that for years, Epstein was the go-to boogeyman for Trump allies looking to smear Democrats. You say Epstein isn't a side note, he's the inciting incident.
Right. He didn't just beg them, he demanded them. The Saturday night social media tweet that he put out basically said, stop, like, cut it out. And a lot of it was reaction to the stuff that you played earlier with Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson and Laura Ingraham. These are loyal Trump supporters that are basically calling BS on how this story is unfolded. And so it's become this fascinating political media story. I don't think it's a boogeyman. I think it's a Frankenstein, this whole Frankenstein monster that you create to terrorize everyone else. Suddenly, Frankenstein turns and terrorizes its own village. So it's fascinating to see for the first time kind of a significant split between the MAGA base and Trump with this conspiracy Frankenstein. Will it last? I don't know. I'm popping popcorn. It's a fascinating thing to watch unfold.
Rich, is your head is spinning as much as mine is at the specter of Hakeem Jeffries allied and saying the same thing? Not allied, maybe just, repeating some of the same talking points that we hear Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly saying at the Young Conservatives Convention?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a wonderful opportunity for Democrats. You could sense the glee underlying what Jeffries was saying there. This is a massive own goal by mega influencers. They got spun up and got wrapped around the axle of their own conspiracy theory. And there's one thing to be on the outside and saying we need all this information. There might be some deep, dark secrets there. It's another thing, as apparently Pam Bondi did, to play it up when you're actually the sitting attorney general of the United States, to release those white binders that you showed just a minute ago, to seem to say, she kind of says she was misinterpreted now, but seemed to suggest you had the client list sitting literally on your desk and then turn around and say, never mind. Of course, that's going to raise questions.
It raises a lot of questions because Pam Bondi's very smart and she would not, what is she talking about? This file being on her desk and then all of a sudden there's no such thing as the file. Rich, Tucker Carlson is now warning very darkly, quote, I feel like we're at a dangerous point now.
Well, look, Trump is the center of the MAGA movement. People may be upset with him. They may not let this go over the medium or long term. Does that mean they're fundamentally going to break with him and turn on him? No. He is the center of things, and this will not affect his approval rating. This will not affect his general standing with the Republican Party. There'll be a lot of noise about it. But at the end of the day, he is the entirety of the show. No one else matters. No influencer matters. No other media outlet matters compared to the massive influence of Donald Trump himself.
Colby, explain why this particular story about Jeffrey Epstein is so important to these MAGA supporters. Why are so many convinced that there is this deep state conspiracy? What's happening?
Well, I think it starts with a deep sort of distrust of government and sort of the deep state and sort of intel operations that blackmail people. And it also ties into some sort of darker and sort of more bonkers conspiracy theories like QAnon, like there's this massive pederast ring, right? And so I think Rich is right. I don't think that this is really going to cost Trump a ton. However, a large majority of the MAGA base really do believe that this is a very important issue, is holding people to account. And they were led to believe by Dan Bongino and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi that there was going to be sort of very powerful political figures and powerful people's influence taken away in handcuffs. And so the problem with the conspiracy theory is that people don't take no for an answer, because when you say there's no there, they just assume you're covering it up, right? And so there's no way to win. They've painted themselves into a corner, and that's why it's going to be a fascinating thing to see unfold.
You were going to say, Rich?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Every denial, no matter how sincere or perhaps plausible, just seems as though it's part of the conspiracy. But look, the Justice Department just doesn't release files that on people it's not going to charge, and there may be disturbing information in there, damaging information. Sincerely, there also may be people's reputations who might be destroyed because they're incidentally mentioned in something that's totally randomly. So if you're going to charge someone in the Justice Department, you charge them. Otherwise, you should shut up. And the big problem here is Pam Bondi did not honor that rule.
Yeah, and she painted herself into this corner by first saying, I've got the client list right here. I'm looking at it as I speak to you. It's right here in front of me, and I'm going to release it soon. Super quick, Rich, you pointed out that obviously everybody, these are all still ardent supporters of President Trump. But there are many, like Steve Bannon, who are warning that the GOP could lose, this is what Steve Bannon said, 40 House seats over this Epstein debacle because they have infuriated their hardcore base supporters. Do you think that could be true?
That's crazy. The idea real live voters out there are just going to sit on their hands because of this.
And then go vote in the midterms because they're mad about Epstein?
the Republicans always have a turnout problem when Trump's not on the ballot. So that'll certainly play a role in the midterms, but it's not going to be because of this. It just seems absurd to me.
Yeah. Okay. Rich Lowry, Colby Hall. This is a story that just continues day after day after day with new developments. Stay tuned. Thanks so much for being with us tonight. Appreciate it. Coming up for us, Zoran Mamdani's slick socialist messaging is resonating with two groups of voters in particular in New York City, Latinos and young people. Those are the same groups who helped propel President Trump to victory last November. And it's starting to alarm some people on the right. We'll explain coming up. Zoran Mamdani's victory in the New York City Democratic primary for mayor was a surprise to many, not least the Democratic establishment that was backing his chief rival, former Governor Andrew Cuomo. NewsNation was the first to announce that Cuomo is going to now be running as an independent on the ticket in the fall. He announced that today. But Mamdani's win was also alarming for people on the right who worry about what trends they might be seeing. Voter analysis shows that he was propelled by two groups in particular, Latinos and young people. And one big issue that is driving them to Mamdani is affordability. The cost of living continues to skyrocket. A lot of these are the same issues that led voters to vote for President Trump. A report released last year revealed that half of all households in New York City lack enough income to cover their costs without assistance from either their family or the government. Rent alone has shot up a third from pre-pandemic levels, and nearly 1 in 5 New Yorkers are behind on their rent payments. So perhaps it's not a surprise that Mamdani's socialist messaging was able to resonate as well as it did. He spent most of his campaign producing slick videos on TikTok and Instagram. His plan mentioned nothing of easing regulatory burdens or corporate taxes that get passed on to consumers. No, Mamdani's answer is government freebies, free childcare, free buses, subsidized groceries, rent freezes, and a $30 minimum wage. And he'll pay for it, he says, by taxing the rich.
When it comes to taxing the 1% of New York City, we will do so by taxing them an additional 2%. A small flat tax, these approaches would raise $10 billion and would transform this city into one where New Yorkers can do more than worry each and every hour of each and every day whether or not they can continue living in the wealthiest city, in the wealthiest country in the world.
Now, whether he can actually do all of that is a different story. After all, any plan to tax the rich assumes there are still rich New Yorkers to tax, and if there's one thing 1%ers can afford, it's a moving truck. Joining us now is Batya Ungar-Sargon. She's the author of the book Second Class, How the Elites Betrayed America's Working Men and Women. She says Mamdani's policies will actually hurt working Americans instead of helping them. Also joining us is Trip Yang. He's a Democratic strategist, covers politics here in New York City carefully. Trip, I'm going to start with you because on today's news, which is that Andrew Cuomo announced he will stay in the race and run as an independent. He said, "I was not aggressive enough in debunking and exposing Zoran Mamdani's unrealistic proposals and divisive agenda. I will not make that mistake again," end quote. Does he have a chance to win, or is he just handing the keys to Gracie Mansion to Mamdani?
Andrew Cuomo has about as great of a chance of winning the mayor's race as the New York Jets right here have of winning the Super Bowl this season, which is slim to none. And Slim probably walked out that door. Look, Zoran Mamdani ran a historic campaign. Here in New York, 18 to 39-year-olds are almost never the largest voting bloc. It's usually middle-aged and senior voters who vote in a local New York primary for mayor. Zoran Mamdani brought out 40,000 new voters to the polls in the Democratic primary. Since the election, almost 3 weeks ago, he has started to unite the Democratic Party, earning endorsements from Democratic members of Congress, labor unions, many of whom had previously supported Andrew Cuomo in the primary. So, look, Zoran Mamdani is a very, very strong candidate. He reminds me a little bit, in terms of Democratic energy, of a Barack Obama or Bernie Sanders. I know we have a lot to talk about, but I actually would say a lot of what he's proposing, like freezing the rent or having universal childcare, is actually in the purview of the mayor of New York, either directly or through advocacy to the New York state government.
Do you think, Batya, that as Mamdani, though, has won the Democratic nomination, that more people are taking a closer second look at some of his policies and perhaps understanding that the mayor can't raise taxes? That's the function of the governor and the state legislature?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm actually surprised by how little re-examination is happening. There was audio released on Friday in which Mamdani, in a 2020 interview, suggested that in domestic violence cases, the police not be called. I guess the women should just suffer the beating in silence and perhaps get killed, which is how those situations often end up. So honestly, I don't see any real re-examination happening. Now, that said, I think it's absolutely ridiculous for Governor Cuomo to try to do a redo of the primary. What happened to democracy? I am not a fan of Zohran Mamdani, but he ran a great campaign and he won that primary. And this is just really silly of Andrew Cuomo. I don't know what he's thinking.
Having said that, Batya, and Tripp too, polls show that Andrew Cuomo comes in second in a general election race against Mamdani and the Republican candidate, and and of course, Curtis Sliwa, sort of a gadfly who runs every time. It's Eric Adams who comes in, at the bottom here. And Eric Adams is refusing to get out of the race. I get it that he's the sitting mayor, but shouldn't he be the one to drop out?
I mean, looking at these numbers, if all four of these people win, it's obviously Mamdani's for the having. You would need two of them to drop out, I believe, for a one-to-one matchup to take place for Mamdani to actually lose. So the question is, which of these narcissists is going to drop out? And there you have it. The answer is none of them.
Tripp, you agree?
Right here in New York, we are very familiar with Andrew Cuomo, Eric Adams, and Curtis Sliwa. Let me tell you, there are a lot of big personalities in the Big Apple, but you'd be hard-pressed to find a collection of three more stubborn New Yorkers than those three right there. I don't know if any of them are going to drop out. On that, we can agree on. And by the way, Zohran Mamdani is going to do a season 3 of this election cycle if all these candidates are going to keep fighting each other. Because right now, he's getting close to measuring the drapes in Gracie Mansion.
Batya, Mamdani won big with college-educated voters who were middle class. You wrote, like Free Palestine or Defund the Police, Zohran Mamdani became a synonym for cool among young leftists and a brand for disaffected white college grads. Again, if they're so educated, if they're college educated, don't they know he can't do half of what he's promising?
He's a lifestyle brand, right? His pins became a thing to show that you're kind of with the cool kids when you're riding the subway, right? It became a kind of virtue signal. We are with the socialist guy. Now, that said, he believes in open borders. He believes in fighting ICE. And really, the views of that college-educated elite is very much in line with that. They want, everybody in America to be on welfare so that they can do their podcasts. And then they want all of the labor to be done by illegal migrants. That's kind of the progressive view of how an economy should work. And unfortunately, it's really taken over the Democratic Party. Everyone's lining up behind this guy to endorse that worldview.
Do you think, what does this say writ large, Batya, very quickly, about the Democratic Party in future elections nationally? We're not talking, Democratic socialists are not going to start winning elections, I don't believe, in the rest of the country, but what does this tell you about where the energy right now is in the Democrats, or at least in this sort of scattershot attempt to define themselves? We heard, former President Barack Obama say today, Democrats need to get tough. Is this what getting tough looks like?
I can tell you the Republicans are licking their chops at the opportunity of hanging this guy around the neck of every national Democrat. So I think that tells you everything you need to know about Zohran Mamdani's, national appeal. This is exactly what Donald Trump has said has happened to the Democrats, that they're a bunch of socialists who don't believe in the dignity of work, don't believe in working class aspirations, don't believe in the American dream anymore, and that they're extreme radical on all sorts of issues that matter to the American people, and he's proving them right.
All right. Batya Ungar-Sargon. Go ahead, Tripp.
That Zohran Mamdani is actually running a positive Democratic version of Donald Trump's campaign. Last year, Donald Trump hoodwinked many of the American public and saying, if you vote for him as president, your egg prices are going to get better. Your gas prices are going to be cheaper. That has obviously not been the case. What Zoran Mamdani is running on is that most New Yorkers, just like most Americans across our country, we want affordability. We want our lives to be a little bit more affordable, your rent or your mortgage to be a little bit cheaper, and fast and free buses. These are things that New Yorkers, half that New Yorkers and Americans want. And so, and by the way, a lot of this the mayor can deliver on either directly or advocacy with state government partners here in New York State. And so, look, Zoran Mamdani ran a really strong positive campaign, actually the inverse of what Trump ran on. And I'll just simply disagree with many of the points that my colleague made earlier, but I know we're short on time, so I'll just leave it at that.
Okay, we'll have you guys both back. We always love a spirited discussion. Thank you from people who don't necessarily agree, so we appreciate you both. But the question, Trip, is going to be, you just pointed out, they're both making lots of promises. The big question always is whether it's President Trump or Zoran Mamdani. How do you deliver on those promises, whether you can? We shall see. Thank you both. We'll have you back.
See. I'm optimistic.
All right, thanks. Coming up for us, a group of scientists are hoping an out-of-this-world discovery will shatter the stigma of UFO research. Could their scientific approach to revolutionize the understanding of unidentified objects in the sky? I'll ask, coming up next. And of course, remember, you can download our NewsNation app for the latest news on our top stories of the night. In order to solve the biggest mysteries of our universe, there need to be scientists willing to study them. But the stigma surrounding UFOs has discouraged generations of researchers from taking a closer look at the age-old question, are we alone? Well, now that's all changing as real scientists with real degrees and real academic credentials are taking on the topic. A group of scientists just published a paper about how to scientifically study UFOs, and they've done their own field work to show how it's done. They say most of the UFOs they have studied on camera were man-made things like drones or helicopters, but there was one, they say, that they couldn't figure quite what it was. So what was it? Joining us now is University of Albany physics professor Matthew Zhadagas, who published this research. All right, so tell us more. How did you go about doing this, and what did you find?
Well, we had the focus of having an instrumented field study for UAPs. So it's not the first, but what we've done is we've published our work in the highest impact factor journal to ever carry a paper on this topic. So while we don't have some kind of final, conclusive, smoking gun evidence of something anomalous, what we've done is really help break down the stigma and the taboo by publishing our results in a major journal, Progress in Aerospace Sciences.
So you were able to identify most of the objects, but one you could not. What do you think that was? Can you describe what properties it had?
That's right. So we found one dark spot with white dots in it in one of our camera systems. Now, by itself, that could be anything, it could be a camera artifact or glitch, but it seemed to have some correspondence, at least to a small degree of statistical significance, with an ionizing radiation event and with Doppler weather radar data hits using publicly available National Weather Service and NOAA data. So again, not conclusive statistically, but this strange hint that there was something physical in the sky and that it wasn't just a camera glitch at the time.
When was this? Like, when did that happen?
This was in July of 2021. So I went with a group called UAPX, and we were part of a documentary film called A Tear in the Sky.
And just very quickly, you started to get interested in this because of the infamous 2004 Tic Tac video from the USS Nimitz. That's what sort of sparked your interest in all this?
So that kind of solidified my interest, but I already had interest much earlier from childhood, growing up watching Unsolved Mysteries and shows, like that with Robert Stack, and seeing all the famous cases like the Cash Landrum and Rendlesham Forest incident. And I just thought there's all these famous cases, even before 2004, that I found the evidence compelling that there was a there, that there was something to study and try to understand.
And it's worth noting, we still don't know what that video, the Tic Tac video, that's still a sort of unexplained mystery. The pilots who saw that in the sky are convinced it was something otherworldly. Matthew Shadagas, fascinating. Come back and tell us more when you have more, but it's fascinating, and it's a great step forward for scientists to be studying this as well. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
All right, coming up for us, Chris Cuomo joins me to discuss the MAGAverse fallout over the Epstein files. He'll be talking to someone who knew Jeffrey Epstein very well. A preview of that conversation coming up next. All right, so President Trump would like nothing more than for everybody, all of his supporters, to stop talking about the Jeffrey Epstein files and the controversy over them. Clearly, that is not going to go away. Chris Cuomo joins me now. Chris, you're going to speak with the former lawyer to Jeffrey Epstein, Alan Dershowitz, about the MAGA fallout over the Epstein files. What does he have to say?
A lot. Dershowitz was accused.
That's right.
At the time I was at CNN, he called me up and he said, I've been accused. Are you going to cover it? And I said, well, look, I'm not looking to take you down. And he goes, no, I want you to cover it. This is a lie. Not only do I have an alibi, I want everything to come out, and I want a chance to prove that I'm innocent, which, by the way, is a very hard thing to do. To prove non-existence of a fact is not easy. But he did come on. He did prove it. The allegations did go away. And he has something that he knows that he wants the audience to be aware of tonight. Now, what I don't get, Elizabeth, is why the administration and why, frankly, the Democrats, who are kind of playing with Epstein a little bit now just because it's bad for Trump, right? Bad for MAGA. Why they're not saying why we haven't heard everything. But tonight, the audience will hear.
All right, because that is the big question. There are, in fact, boatloads of information. I talked with a lawyer for some of the victims who said there's a ton of information that hasn't been made public. Why not? So that is the question. Looking forward to hearing your conversation with Alan Dershowitz. Have a great show, Chris.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.